Professor Gaynell Sapenter Gainer. This is my mom. She has made her own Black history, and you have got to hear about it. We are going to do a series of videos where you can find out about her from her childhood to now. And so what she managed to do, how God used her, how she was innovative and creative in the workplace. And so her amazing history is a must hear. So I encourage you to stay. I encourage you to subscribe, to share, and to put some words in the comments of encouragement and how much you were entertained and how you enjoyed her Black history. So without any further ado, let me introduce you to my mother, Professor Gaynell Gainer.
Hi, it's an honor to be here this evening to share my story with you as a part of the Black history.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. So first, I would like to start off with where you were born and maybe a significance about that time or the place where you were born.
Thank you. I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, and in 1940. And I was born at the Charity Hospital. And the hospital was in Maine, New Orleans, and I lived with my grandparents for several years in Algiers, Louisiana, while my parents were in Washington and New York area. My dad was drafted into the service, and he was there for at least almost 5 years. I'll stop and let you ask me additional questions.
Well, that is phenomenal. So the hospital that you were born in, I understand that a lot of people back then were not born in hospitals. And so for you to be born in a hospital was amazing. Now, was that because your mother was a nurse, or was there a different reason why you were able to be born in the hospital?
Yes, it was mainly because my mother had just recently completed her training as a licensed practical nurse. And so as a result of that, when I was born, it was easy for her to have me born in the Charity Hospital proper, because most of the African Americans at that time were having their babies at home.
So okay. Wow, that is phenomenal. So while you were in Algiers, can you tell us a little bit about your grandparents as well as your parents, what you can remember at that time of your childhood?
Okay. In that it was the early 40s, my grandparents lived in Algiers, and I have an older sister, 2 years older than myself, and we were the only two living children at that time. And so we stayed with my grandparents, and my grandfather was one of the first African American or colored cab services owners and cab service in Algiers. There was one other colored cab service called Coleman. So my grandfather's name was Thomas C. Taylor. And my grandmother was an individual. When she was young, she cooked for one of the commissioners of New Orleans. And what happened while I was there was an incident where the West Bank had a bridge built. And while the bridge was being built to connect Maine, New Orleans with Algiers, this bridge was being built. And so my grandmother was able to bake cakes and pies, and she sold them to the workmen that were building the bridge. And I did not realize what the word entrepreneur was until I became older, of course, and came on to San Antonio. But I just wanted you to know that in looking back, my grandfather truly was an entrepreneur. He was a businessman. He had several cabs that he owned. He also had rent houses.
Mm.
At least two of them were in the back of the property we lived in. We lived in a two-story colonial home. And so realizing that, I could see that he was truly an entrepreneur.
Wow,
And
that is amazing. Now, didn't your grandmother have a notion store?
yes, as a result of selling her pies and cakes, she was able to raise enough money to open a notion store.
And
And
can you
those
tell
are,
us what
yeah,
that is? Because we don't
right,
know what a notion store is.
right. This notion store provided for African Americans and people of color an opportunity to go in and try on creams, face creams, cosmetics, any type of toiletries, perfumes, etc. Because if we were to go to the drugstore um, where African Americans could go in and purchase items, if it was a white-owned store, the we were not able to try on lipsticks or any of their products. We had to just buy them. And so she really, it was an innovative idea at that time. And so she was able to have the store open, and it was appreciated by the people of color and African Americans in that community.
That is wonderful. That is wonderful. So, innovation and creativity ran in your blood DNA. So, that is amazing. So, you came from parents and grandparents that were entrepreneurs, that were educated, that broke a lot of barriers in the 1930s and 40s as they were, living their life in New Orleans and Algiers, Louisiana. That is amazing. So how did you move from Algiers to San Antonio, Texas?
After my dad finished his time in the military, um, he found a need to come to San Antonio area, not only to see his father, who was still alive, my grandfather, Lawrence Sapenter. He decided to take the family to San Antonio, and it was around 1950 that we all came to San Antonio.
And so, how many brothers and sisters do you have now, currently?
Yes, it's six of us now, but I did lose one brother. He was the youngest boy in the family, Demetrius.
So I can imagine being a Black family moving from New Orleans to San Antonio in the South. Where did you live in San Antonio?
Well, at that time, my parents really didn't know anyone, and because the telephone system was different then, very limited. And it was not until he was in town for a while that he was able to find a place where he could stay with relatives. But when we initially came to San Antonio, we stayed in a rooming house. We actually rented a home with a woman that had the appearance, she was a mulatto, and therefore she evidently was able to acquire, and she had property. And we lived there comfortably until we found out that we did have a cousin that was a beautician, and she lived in what I see now as a middle-class neighborhood, and we were able to stay in a garage apartment in her backyard on the
Wow.
top. And by that time, it was the two of us, and my mother had just had my brother that's next to me. So it wound up being three of us in 1950, 51, 52. And then after that, we learned about the housing, um, which was called well, it was East Side housing.
Okay.
And we were able to move in one of the new dwellings. And we stayed in that housing until I finished high school and went on to college. And after I completed my college at Incarnate Word, which is what it was called then, it's University of Incarnate Word now. My sister and I saved our money, put our money down for our parents to buy a home.
Wow. Now that is amazing. Being Black in San Antonio and being able to save money, you and your sister saved money or to help with the down payment on your parents' home. That is phenomenal. But we don't want to miss out on what school did you go to in elementary, middle school, and high school in San Antonio?
In Algiers, I attended All Saints Catholic School, and I spent 1 year at a public school, which was called McDonald 32.
Okay.
And then when we came to San Antonio, I attended St. Peter Claver for a year or so, and then we learned about Douglas. So I attended Douglas Junior High for a year before going into high school. And now I finished my last 4 years at Phyllis Wheatley High. And while I was there, I was W Club Queen, which was an honor. They consider your academics and your reputation with that title. And I was fortunate enough to be named W Club Queen, class of 58. And that was the year I graduated. I was also editor-in-chief of my yearbook. And at the end of that year, my mother had heard about the nursing program that was very widely spoken about at Incarnate Word. And she went to the Sisters of the Incarnate Word and talked to them about considering me for a scholarship in nursing. So I did, I was accepted, and I was able to spend 2 years with that scholarship, which benefited me greatly. And when I was in the end of my sophomore year, and while I was doing my practicum at Santa Rosa Medical Center, it was called Santa Rosa Hospital at the time,
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that there was this lady that was small in stature manipulating the x-ray equipment, and I was fascinated by it. And that program was brand new in 1961, 62, and I was fortunate enough to be able to be one of the first African-American students to enter that program, along with nuns. And so I was really the only lay person of color that was in that program at the time. And
Wow,
to
that is
complete,
amazing. So when you say layperson, you're talking about someone that is not in ministry, someone
correct,
that was not a practicing nun. So you went to college with nuns, and you were the only African American woman or male, just you were the only African American in that program at that time. That is a trailblazer. And I also thank God for my grandmother, Helen Sapenter, because she was a trailblazer to even think of going to talk to people that were not Black to give her Black daughter a scholarship. So that's amazing how she was not afraid. She was not afraid
she was not
of,
afraid. She was very
yes, not afraid. And then you weren't afraid by stepping out and doing something that has never been done before, entering a program that no one else that just started. So that is amazing.
exactly.
So we have about 5 more minutes before we end this session. But can you tell me one of the times, I remember you telling me a story about my grandmother, how she got ran out of town. And I would love the people to know how your mother, what your mother did because of that.
Yes, my mother, Helen May Sapenter, she was around 14 or 15 years old at the time, and she was in Algiers walking on the sidewalk, and this Anglo lady was walking towards her, and she asked her to step off the sidewalk. Well, my mother had, she told me, she had some fairly new shoes, and in those days, you only had your Sunday shoes, your school shoes, and tennis shoes. Well, she just happened to have had a pair of new school shoes, and she did not want to step off the sidewalk into the mud because it was rainy that day. And so when she refused, the lady continued to complain. And so the chief of police in the Algiers area spoke with my grandfather. And now I understand why my grandfather always said when someone asked him his name, he would give them the complete name, Thomas C. Taylor. And because the chief of police said, Tom, I think you need to get your daughter out of town because it's dangerous. The lady keeps talking about the fact that your daughter was disrespectful because she didn't step off the sidewalk. So he did make arrangements for her to go to Oakland, California, where she did receive her high school education in an integrated school setting, public school setting. And while she did not participate in any extracurricular activities like beauty contests that were very popular at that time, because even among our own community of people of color and African Americans, if you weren't a certain complexion, you were not going to even win a beauty contest. So what she went for, she entered spelling bees, and she was very successful. And even as I went to college, I would ask her to proofread my work, and she was an excellent speller. So I feel blessed that she did receive a first-class education as a result of this tragic occurrence.
Well, that is amazing. So we know now where you get your spunk from. We know where you get your trailblazer attitude from. And that is just such an exciting story of your mother and grandmother, which is my mother and great grandmother, and just coming from an entrepreneurial standpoint and an education standpoint. 1940s and 1950s, 1930s, all of those times we know were designed to hold African Americans back. So I appreciate your story. I appreciate your history.
Thank you.
And you being a W Club queen, that means that you were and are beautiful. I found a new word that I just want to use on you. You are Blacknificent. And so you are still Blacknificent. And so I'm excited about our series.
I'm very grateful.
I'm very excited about our series. So I look forward to series number 2, where we're going to talk about your college and your early life after college. Will be in our session 2. So again, everyone, thank you for joining Crystal Henry TV. Please come back for the next sessions. I don't know how many we'll have, but I know there'll be more than 3. So thanks again for joining Crystal Henry TV. Please subscribe, like, and share. This is Her Black History, my Blacknificent mom, Professor Gaynell Gainer. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm very blessed.